Hi. Somebody smile at me. Thank you. All right. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you. You are good and you are faithful. Your word is a living thing, sharper than a two-edged sword. And you've given it to us to wield, and I pray that today you would speak today. I pray that your words would come forth, and anything that isn't of you, just keep it out so we don't waste anybody's time. I just want what you have. In Jesus' name, amen. Yeah, so I'm not going to blow anybody's mind here this morning. This is kind of friendly reminder stuff, okay? So, and I'm coming out of Genesis 4, 6 and 7. This is right after the fall in the garden, right? So sin is here, and the dust is still all settling from that, and people are trying to figure out life. And you've got Cain, and you've got Abel, right? You all know the story. They both bring an offering to God, and God accepts Abel's and rejects Cain. And Cain takes it very personally and gets very upset about this. And this is where we're picking it up in Genesis 4, 6 through 7. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? Why is your countenance fallen? If you do well, will not your countenance be lifted up?" I kind of think of this as like one of history's first sort of father-teenage son conversation, right? It's sort of like, what's wrong with you? You know, nothing. What do you mean nothing? It doesn't look like nothing. Been moping around here for days. What's wrong with you? Oh yeah, he knows. Well, you didn't like my thing. You liked his thing, but you didn't like my thing, right? And God's like, hey, you know, you did it wrong. He did it right. There's a right way and there's a wrong way to do it. Next time, do it right. Not that big a deal. Still my son. Everything's fine. I'm just showing you. It says if you do well, your countenance will be lifted. Kind of like, you want to feel better? Do better. There. Yeah, it sounds kind of like how I would have said it. But it's the next part that interests me. He says this, and if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door, and its desire is for you, and you must master it. So, what's that all about? If you were to go out on the street and start interviewing random people and say, okay, what do you know about Cain in the Old Testament? Right? Well, first of all, a lot of people would say, what's an Old Testament? But forget them. Those who know a little bit of Bible, what would they say to you? Who was Cain from the Old Testament? I think most, if not everybody, would say, oh, Cain, he's the guy who killed his brothers. Right. That's what Cain is known for. That's his identity. It's tattooed. It's there forever. He'll never be free of it. Cain's the guy that killed his brother. And all the big brothers are going, that's right. I have one. But how many people do you think would say, oh, Cain? Yeah, he's the guy with anger issues. He's the guy that allowed anger and resentment to live in his heart and grow and build until it got to the point where it got turned into resentment and rage and expressed itself in violence. That's who Cain is. No, we don't really think about that. We identify Cain with the big blow-up, the moment in time where everything just went nuts, and he screwed up his life, killed somebody, and everything goes nuts. Because we tend to see sin pretty much in that moment, but we don't really pay much attention to its inception, do we? We don't notice the days of the small beginnings where it all started. We just notice it when it gets huge. But back there, you know, it's just a little anger, just a little pride, just a little whatever, fill in the blank, everybody does this, everybody's sort of like that. And we don't really worry too much about it. It's just human nature. Kind of like the uncle that everyone doesn't really talk about. It's like, he's just kind of shooting his mouth off or whatever, acting out. It's okay. And we tolerate a lot of small things, right, in our own lives, and we'd ignore them, and then one day it rises up and invades Poland. And we go, hey, you can't do that, Really, I can't? Where were you before? So it's interesting. God gets involved with this way back here. Not there. He gets involved way back here and says, hey, you're going down a dark path. And you better make a correction now while you still can. Because if you don't, sin is crouching at the door, and its desire is for you, and you must master it. And so, I want to talk a little bit today about the sin that crouches at the door. This might be a little heavy, I don't know, but I want to just say that my heart and the purpose of this, God's desire for us and you as individuals in the church is simply that we walk in victory, that we have victory, that we dominate Satan, that we walk in what he's called us to. And I don't just mean theologically, I mean practically. Between the Sundays, we should be able to see it at work. And there are some very realistic, practical things that make that happen. It's not going to just happen all by itself. We have to be paying attention. So he says, sin's crouching at the door, and its desire is for you, and you must master it. So, if I tell you something's crouching at the door, what kind of picture does that conjure up in your mind? What crouches, right? What do you think? It's like, oh, yeah, whatever, man. Yeah, that's a good idea. We should call it that. What's that? Lion? Yeah. Well, who's good at acting? Can you show me what crouching looks like? Somebody? Go ahead. Jump up. Show us. I didn't arrange this. Anybody? Any drama people here? Nikki? No? Nobody wants to try? It's easy. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, like this. Very good. Not like this. Not like whatever, dude. But like a coiled spring, right? Just waiting for what? Opportunity, room to pounce, right? So that's what we are told that sin does. It crouches at the door. We all know about doors. We have doors. So what would you do if you came down in the middle of the night and you noticed that there's somebody hanging around your front door? Just crouching. What would you do? What would you do? Lock the door? Yeah, well, we'll get to there. Turn the light on. How about, excuse me, can I help you? What's going on here? And imagine they go, oh, nothing, I'm just waiting. Oh, waiting for what? An opportunity. Oh, well, as long as he stays outside, I guess. Fine. Just try not to hit the petunias. No, you wouldn't do that. You'd find a baseball bat, wouldn't you? Chase, get out of here, you. We understand that with our personal safety. God says sin's crouching at the door. Do you think it still is? Is it still there? Is it appropriate for us to talk to each other about sin? I mean, is it a thing still? Or, hey, it says in Romans that we're dead to sin and alive to Christ, so it shouldn't be an issue anymore. So sin's dead, right? I don't know, man. For something that's dead, it sure does a lot. Seems to be pretty alive and well. So is it a good idea to kind of face it once in a while? What is this door anyway that sin is crouching at, waiting, ready to spring? Well, what's a door? A door is a weakness in a wall, isn't it? It's a thing, it's a break in a wall where stuff can come and go through. Are there doors in your life? Do you know where the doors are? Do you even acknowledge that there are doors? Are there doors? The places where sin can get at you, that you know about, maybe nobody else knows about. Have you thought about it lately? Have you dealt with any of that? Do you have a plan as to how you're going to deal with that in your life, or is you just kind of taking it as it comes? We seem to have a weird relationship with sin. And I think it starts with realizing it's there. And its desire is for you. And then God says this weird thing, and you must master it. I used to like that more when I was younger and more invincible. I used to kind of like the idea, I'm going to master sin. Hold on a minute. When were we ever told that we master sin? Is that really a thing? Where else does the Bible tell us to go out and master sin? Sin masters us. Jesus mastered sin. Well, why was God telling Cain to master sin in this moment? I wonder. I think of a young boy kind of hiding behind dad's leg, poking fun at the neighborhood bully. And he feels like he can get away with it because he's safe and dad's there. And if dad's really paying attention and doing his job, you know what he does? He goes, okay, here, he's all yours. But you better master it. See, God's telling Cain, I think about this differently now. You want to tangle with sin? Go ahead. Good luck with that. I think it's better to deal with it early. I think it's better to look at your heart and guard the doors of your hearts. Do you know where your doors are? Do you recognize sin? Hebrews 12:1 says, therefore, since we have such a great cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let's rid ourselves of every obstacle and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let's run with endurance the race that is set before us. That sin that so easily entangles us. Do you know what that is? Does it have a name? Have you noticed it? Have you tangled with it before? How are we supposed to deal with it? Here and now. Like I said before, I think there's a lot of practicality to living lives of victory, not just declaring I believe stuff. Doors are a very practical thing. We've got to pay attention to them. And it starts by knowing that they're there. Recently, the body of Christ was confronted with a very disturbing and frustrating thing. I'm going to mention a name that most of you will know. It's Ravi Zacharias. Raise your hand, please, if you don't know who I'm talking about. Okay, that's fine. A lot of people do. Ravi Zacharias recently passed away, but he was a very effective and powerful apologist for the gospel. He had a ministry and a career that spanned decades, traveled all around the world, and had amazing fruit. And it's a sweet man who had favor everywhere he went. Secular and religious alike, Christian, Jew, didn't matter. People wanted, he was a real high-level intellectual and did a fantastic job of expressing and alliterating the Bible and the gospel and answering questions. He'd be on universities and taking questions and all this stuff. So did curriculums, did a lot of writing. We did use this stuff in some of our groups. Fantastic stuff. He passed away last year in May, I think, and then some stuff started coming out. And some of you will know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to spend a lot of time cataloging it, but it was at first one person, then two people, and a lot of different women laying out accusations of misconduct of his around the world, and that was obviously ungodly and immoral, and in some cases maybe criminal, depending on if you believe the reports. And there's some debate, and there's some that are saying this didn't happen, but I read the report that came out from a firm that the board hired to look into it, and it's pretty damning stuff. So there's that. All right. And that came out about a year ago, and everybody just went, oh, come on. How could this be? So for those of you who were kind of up on that, I want you to go back and think for a minute about your first reaction to it. What did you think the first time you heard? First time I heard about it, I said, no way. Didn't happen. Not possible. Not this guy. We listened to a podcast by Josh McDowell. You know that name? He's a similar figure. That, in fact, these two were very, very good friends. Josh McDowell had a lot to do with Ravi becoming a Christian. And I heard an interview with Josh McDowell, and he was saying, I couldn't believe it. I never would have thought in a million years. I had no idea that this sort of thing was going on, right? And how could this be? And then he made an amazing statement. He said, it could happen to anyone. And that was the thing that made me go, whoa, we need to talk about this. So why am I bringing up such an awful thing here in this meeting and in this assembly? I think we got to look at it. I think it's instructive for us to see how it works and what happened. So my first reaction to this thing was, no way, not Ravi. Why did I think that? Because this sort of thing never happens? No, because this is Ravi. This isn't just anybody. This is him. This is somebody, and I'm talking about the amazing ministry, the fruit of his talents, his gifts, and his sweet personality and everything. There's no way he could be guilty of anything like this. And then as the information started to come out more and more, and I couldn't deny it anymore, then you got to deal with, well, how could this be? How could this possibly be? And the answer I come back to is, how could I be so surprised? What do I think? He's impervious? Do I think he's above that? Because if I think he's above that, if I think that about somebody or myself, you know what I do? I turn my back on the door. And I don't pay attention anymore. Right? And when we start thinking like that and talking to ourselves like that, you know what the enemy does who's crouching? Excellent. It's exactly what I want you to think. Because he works in the darkness. Or maybe your reaction was something different. Maybe it was pure disgust and anger when you heard this. This is despicable. Obviously a phony. Obviously not really a Christian. Right? And when we think like that, you know what we're really saying? I would never do that. I am above that. I would never do that, right? Is that a safe thing to think? Again, excellent. That's right. Keep thinking like that. You're better than that. Don't pay me no mind. I'm just crouching, right? What do you do with doors? You pay attention to them, don't you? You lock them. You make sure they're secure. But if you don't even think there's a door, I've been in people's homes before working, and we're down in the basement. You open up or you move a bookcase. There's a door here. Hey, what's behind this door? And they go, door? Cool. Well, now we got to open it. There could be anything back there. It's never anything. But no, seriously, it's kind of a weird thing that you wouldn't know there's a door there. But if you're not paying attention to it, anything can happen. And we've got to start with this whole sin business of being honest with ourselves. Yes, it's awful, it's horrible, it's just despicable, but that could be me. That could be me if I'm not careful. I may not have that particular opportunity, or it may not be that, but if I'm not careful, I have no guarantee of living a life of victory just because I say I believe in victory. And we got to be careful, church. We got to watch ourselves and watch each other. And watch each other. That's what we're doing here, by the way. And if you wanted to, you could read the report. I don't necessarily recommend it for easy reading. It's disturbing. But what is instructive about it is yeah, there's the horrible stuff that was going on. That's the Cain killing his brother. But you go back and you see some of the stuff that was going on all the way along the way that starts out kind of innocent. That starts out kind of, yeah, I can see that. You know, that's kind of what has, organizationally, whatever. And then, but when you put it all together and you see, here's a guy that was living in a reality where he was not being held accountable. Nobody was paying attention to some of the details. This was a setup, pure and simple. Okay, from the enemy. I'm not saying he's not responsible. He is. I'm not trying to make him out to be a victim. But it was a complete setup. Do you realize this about your enemy? He is looking to set you up. And if we're not paying attention, that can be us. Okay? And it's not that I'm better than that. Galatians 6:1, brethren, if anyone is caught in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness than this. Each one looking to yourself, that you too will not be tempted. Bear one another's burdens, and thereby fulfill the law of Christ. For anyone who thinks he is something when he is nothing deceives himself. 1 Corinthians 10:6-14. Now, these things happen as examples to us, that we would not crave evil things as they also craved. Do not be idolaters as some of them were, as is written. The people sat down to eat and drink and stood up to play. Nor let us act immorally as some of them did, and 23,000 fell in one day. Nor let us try the Lord as some of them did and were destroyed by the serpents. Nor grumble as some of them did, were destroyed by the destroyer. Okay. Now these things happened to them as an example, and they are written for our instruction, upon whom the ends of the ages have come. Therefore, let him who thinks he stands take heed that he does not fall. No temptation has overtaken you, but such as is common to man, and God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will provide the way of escape also, that you may be able to endure it. Therefore, my beloved, flee from idolatry. And two words there that stand out to me. One is crave, and the other one is flee. One of them is to do with our lusts. The other one has to do with what we're supposed to do with that, our actions. Flee. It doesn't say to master sin. Flee it. Do you have an escape route? Like a fire escape to flee sin? Do you even think you should flee sin? You see, at least speaking as a guy, we don't flee anything, do we? Or at least we don't think we're supposed to. We've been brought up in the American, sentiment, and we watch Westerns. We face the enemy, and we don't think it's really very manly to have to run. We want to win. We don't want to run. I have this sort of fantasy about myself that at the end of my life, I sort of ride up to the gates of heaven on a black stallion with shining armor, and I sort of dismount and stride up to the gate like this and go, that's it. Life lived. Nailed it. Now what? What's next? Right? That's kind of like how guys see themselves. Jerry Seinfeld says that men sort of see themselves as low-level superheroes, right? We just sort of see ourselves like that. That's why whenever you see someone driving down the road with a mattress on the roof and the arm out the top, that's always a guy. I got it, right? This is kind of how we approach sin and temptation. I got this. No problem. No big deal. I'm not running away from anything. As a matter of fact, if I take steps to protect myself from temptation, I see it as a weakness, as a failure. I should be better than that. Do you ever think like that? It's like I shouldn't be having to do that. I shouldn't need accountability. I shouldn't need people in my life saying, how you doing with that thing? I should be above it all. Excellent. That's right. Keep thinking like that. You should be above it all. 2 Corinthians 2:11, so that no advantage would be taken to us by Satan, for we are not ignorant of his schemes. Unfortunately, we are often ignorant of his schemes. Do you know he has a scheme? Get back to that. So how did this thing happen with Ravi? Look, nobody wakes up one morning and says, you know what, I think I'll throw my whole life in the toilet. That's today's agenda. It doesn't happen like that. It starts out with small little infractions, little ways that boundary lines are crossed, barriers come down, things are made excuses for, and little by little by little until you're so deceived and so full of your own whatever that you literally believe that what you're doing is fine. And that is exactly what happened in this case. We kid ourselves. We play head games with ourselves. And God doesn't want us to play head games with ourselves. Let's talk about a couple ways temptation comes to us. It says in 1 Corinthians 10:16, no temptation has overtaken you, but what is common to men. Let's talk for a minute about the temptation which overtakes you. That's the temptation that didn't come from inside you, it came from outside you. You know? You're just minding your own business, doing your thing, you're not doing anything wrong, and there it is. Right? Like the sin's outside the door, but sometimes it slides a memo underneath. All right? And you're dealing with whatever that is in your life. And you don't need me to give you a list. Put your flavor on this. Okay? It comes over you. Do you realize in that moment that you're being set up? God is faithful, will provide a way of escape, right? That's the flee part, but you have to even know you're being tempted. Joseph is the guy that knew he was being set up. Remember Joseph from the Old Testament? Here's a young man, just minding his own business, doing his job, right? Working for his boss, didn't do anything wrong. And all of a sudden, there's this woman. I know all these examples seem to be about that. Most of the Bible is about men, so sorry. It's very instructive. Here comes the boss's wife, who very subtly says, "Lie with me." Jeez. And she keeps doing this day after day. Yeah, not a lot of nuance here. Lie with me. Every day it says, and he keeps saying no, and she keeps coming back. And I used to read this story as a boy, and I'd get to this part. Lie with me. This lady sure takes a lot of naps, I think. Weird. I was so much happier when I didn't know anything. So what happens? What did Joseph do about this? Well, what did Joseph not do about this? The first thing he did not do is fool himself by saying this isn't happening. No thanks, I'm not really into that. I think he was very much into that. Okay? He didn't turn his back on it and try to ignore it and laugh it off. This is a setup, you guys. I'm a contractor. I work in people's homes all the time, right? And I can tell you from experience that this sort of thing has never happened, ever, to me, right? This is weird. I don't think women do this, generally speaking. This is definitely a demonic thing. this is a son of Jacob. He's a son of the covenant. And there's a plan here to destroy what God is trying to do through Israel, and Joseph is a part of that. Well, he understands what's going on, right? So he realizes it's being set up. He didn't fool himself into thinking that nothing was happening. He also didn't fool himself into thinking he can fix this. Well, ma'am, why don't you and I sit down, have a cup of tea? Let's talk about what your real needs are, because something's wrong here. No, he didn't do anything like that either. Okay? Here's a guy that knew his limitations. Here's a guy that knew when to get out of Dodge. He didn't try to be bigger than this. Okay? And what I just said, these are exactly things that were going on with Ravi. He was meeting with people and having ministry sessions alone with, trying to help people. That is just where it goes. That's how it starts, Very inappropriate stuff. Nobody was checking up on this stuff. Nobody was saying, hey, that doesn't seem right. He had all kinds of people around him that were supposed to be protecting him, and nobody did. Actually, toward the end, someone finally did speak up, and he got slapped down and ostracized. Said, how dare you? This is Ravi. Who you think you're talking about? See, we've got Ravi on this pedestal. He can't be a part of anything like that. So you're just crazy to say such a thing. And the more we do that with people and ourselves, the more we set them up. Right? So he didn't tell him, he didn't fool around with his own, he didn't fool himself and say this isn't really happening. He didn't try to fix her. And he also didn't try to excuse himself. He didn't say, life hasn't been too good so far. Abandoned, betrayed by my own family, thrown into a pit, drug out, sold to slave traders. Now I'm living in Egypt. Life isn't so good. I haven't done anything wrong. Maybe it's time for a little Joseph. God will understand. Here's the first person maybe in my whole life that wants to give me something, comfort or whatever, and maybe I'll just take it. I'm justified. I deserve this. I've been having a bad time, and God will understand. You ever hear these kind of thoughts coming through your? Let me say something. God will understand, and He will forgive. He already has. But there's somebody else who won't understand. Okay? Remember that sin, the enemy? He won't understand. This is the moment he's been waiting for. This is the spot he's been trying to get you into. He is the original kick 'em while they're down, twist the knife when it's in guy. He has no mercy. He's not going to go, oh, he's been having a rough year. Leave him alone. No. Okay? That's when he pours it on. That's when the destruction kicks into high gear. We got to know this about him. There's no mercy there. It's the day after the funeral. It's when you've lost your job. It's when everything's collapsing. That's the moment when he comes in like a flood. And he will not hesitate to rip your life apart if he can, if we let him. So he doesn't tell himself, Joseph doesn't tell himself that this is okay. It's I deserve this. No, he didn't do any of that. Joseph does what? Flees, doesn't he? Takes off. Literally runs out of the house. Sometimes that's what you have to do. It is not very dignified. You don't look like you're all that when it happens. You know that thing about striding up to the gates like I conquered? No. You know what Jesus' vision of us is? It's more like somebody walking up to the gate with one eye and one arm or one hand. Because he said, whatever you have to do to protect yourself, if it means plucking your own eye out or cutting an arm off, it's worth it. That's how he wants you. I mean, he doesn't want that. But he'll take you like that. That's the reality, right? Joseph bolted. And you might say, well, a lot of good it did him. He still went to prison for it, right? That doesn't seem like a great plan. Well, that's true, but what if he had capitulated? We'll never know. But you may never heard his name. Huh? So that's the sin that overtakes you. I mean, the temptation that overtakes you. You're just minding your own business, and here it comes. Okay? And in that moment, God says, I will give you a path to get out. Take it, even if it doesn't look good. Even if you have to humble yourself. Even if you have to tell somebody, I'm not that great a guy. Would you pray for me? I messed up. I need help. That's what we need. That's what we're here for. And when someone says that to you, what is your response? Oh, that's disgusting. I thought you were better than that. Do you ever hear yourself say something about somebody that sounds like, gee, I thought they were a Christian, when you hear about them falling? What does that indicate? That kind of thinking. It indicates that you think that because you're saved, you shouldn't have problems. You shouldn't mess up. You shouldn't say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. And we isolate ourselves from each other when we act like that, when we think like that. I can't humble myself. What will they think? I'm an elder. Oh no. They have to see me like what? Right? And we put ourselves in harm's way spiritually when we think like that. Then there's other temptations. There's temptations that we choose. What about those? I asked you before, do you know where the doors are? Let me say that differently. You know where the doors are, don't you? Oh yeah, you do. You can find them in the dark. And sometimes you do. It's that place you go to for comfort when you're stressed or upset or bored or whatever. And we walk right into it, and Satan says, thank you. Just made my job easier. I don't know that we have a promise from God that he will help us with those temptations necessarily when we do it to ourselves. Sometimes he'll just step aside and say, okay, you want to master sin? Have at it. And I'll be here waiting with a mop bucket when it's all over. He'll let us crash and burn if we want to. And he does sometimes. Did you ever read Psalm 51? Behold, I was brought forth in iniquity, and in sin my mother conceived me. This is David at the lowest point of his life. King David can tell you all about the sin that we invite, right? He knows all about it. But we focus on the crash and burn in the moment where he's sitting there in a heap going, I'm the worst human being ever, God. You must be just so sick of me. I'm evil from the beginning, you know? God's like, it's not that you're evil, you're just not very smart. Listen, what was he doing up on that roof to begin with? You know the roof I'm talking about? What was he doing up there? What do you think he told himself or his house staff of why he was going up there? Oh yeah, I got to go up and check the specs on the rotary thing. Something's not, I'll take care of it. I'm going to go up there. No, you stay here. You guard things. I'll come back. Right? He knew what he was doing. He knew where the doors are. I can see the footman rolling her eyes. Must be Thursday. Yep. He had no one fooled but himself. Everybody, and especially God, knew exactly what he was doing and where he was going and why he was going. And then when it crashes all around him, he's surprised. He literally had himself so deceived that he could do this thing, take another man's wife, and then have the man killed to cover up for it, and apparently get up and go to work the next day like nothing happened. Like, hey, I guess I'm king, I can do these things. I guess I'm entitled. God will understand. I'm a busy guy. I got a lot going on. I have needs. And I'm the king. Well, God didn't understand this time. He didn't understand this time. unless you think he got away with it, read again. He didn't lose his life, but his family was never the same. The house of David never recovered from this. It was a mess. It was a mess. But he's sitting there in surprise, I think, at, Nathan the prophet had to pin him down and say, listen, I'm going to tell you about somebody, a rich ruler kind of guy that took advantage of a poor family, and he paints this whole picture for him, and David gets all mad. Oh, we got to do something about this. This guy ought to be put to death, and I'm really upset. And Nathan's like, I'm talking about you. Oh, yeah, that was bad. I shouldn't have done that. See, but where was all this concern way back when the attitude started, the entitlement, the I'm this guy and I can do what I want? We don't pay attention to that. We only pay attention when it blows up and implodes. So this is to me, this is the key to victory. We got to pay attention to our hearts because from it flow the springs of life. James 1:45. When lust is conceived, okay, there's that word. It's not a sexual word. It just means a strong desire, okay? So when lust is conceived, it gives birth to sin. When sin is accomplished, it brings forth death. Do not be deceived, my beloved brethren. One thing brings another. Lust brings about sin, sin, destruction. We all know this. But what's interesting to me here is the imagery that he uses is that of childbirth. Conception, childbirth. Now, if you've been through the 5th grade, you know that once conception happens, the birth is just what? A matter of time. Unless something unnatural happens in between, the one brings forth the other. Conception, birth. We're always surprised at the birth, woo! But we don't pay any attention to the conception. I'm not a doctor. I don't work in hospitals. But I'm pretty sure there's not a lot of women giving birth going, where did that come from? I had no idea. Did that come out of me? When did this happen? How could this happen? Not a lot of surprised faces in the delivery room, is there? And yet, how many times do I go, did I say that? Did I just say that out loud? Where did that come from? I didn't know I had that kind of anger in me. I didn't know I was capable of that kind of selfishness and whatever. Well, where was I back here when we entertained the little thoughts, the little attitudes, the little choices to gratify myself or ignore somebody else or disobey something from the Lord? Or indulge myself in laziness, or whatever. Again, you fill in your own flavor. We need to pay attention way back then, because what happened to Ravi and anybody else that you know about, these big, huge, awful things that take place, none of us are better than that. Do you know that? We're not better than that. You don't have to be a phony baloney, not real Christian to have a really, really bad day. So we kind of get careless. We put ourselves in situations that are not wise. We play around. I have this memory of a time when I was on a missions trip in Mexico, and we took a day and off. We went on this hike up a mountain, or sort of a mountain. So you can get up and down it in one day, so I guess it's not really a mountain, but it was quite a climb. It was very steep, and at some points in this trail, you're climbing like a ladder almost. It's like that. And it was kind of cool. About halfway up, we come across this abandoned sort of concrete bunker thing that used to be the landing zone for those gondolas things where you get in and you ride the cable car all the way up the mountain, and then it lands in here and turns around and goes back down. And this is a big, huge, cavernous concrete thing, probably about half the size or so of a tennis court. Okay, and it's got the concrete there, and then there's a roof about 8-10 feet above that. And people were going up on top of this roof to just kind of hang out. It's sort of a halfway point, catch some rays and relax. So we climbed up there too, and we're walking around. It's just interesting. And it kind of goes out, I don't know, probably about from here to the sound booth maybe. So the mountain's like this, right? And this thing is going out like that. It's sort of geometry, right? And so as you walk, you start out, you're at grade level, but as you walk out, the mountain's falling away, right? So by the time you get out to the edge of this thing, it's kind of like you're looking down at trees, tops of trees, right? So, wow, we're up here. Now, one of the things I remember and I noticed about this, there was no rules up there. This is Mexico. There's no signs. There's no stripes on the thing saying stay back. There's no regulations. There's no ranger standing there going, everybody stay back. There's no guardrail. There's nothing. There's nothing up there. All there is life and death. That's it. I'm okay. I'm not okay. It's a very explicit line, and everybody saw it, and everybody knew it, and it was the same line for everybody. Right? No question marks, no gray areas here. All right? No debate. There's no little groups sitting around going, well, where do you think the line is? Well, I think it might be over there. Well, I think well, that might be your truth, but my truth. None of that. Okay? Very clear. Life, death. All right. But what was different was the way everybody treated it. Some people were walking right up there, and it's kind of like, hey, this is kind of cool. Look at down there. You know, other ones are sitting down, dangling their feet. Some of them are walking along the edge. Like, have you ever seen those YouTube videos of these idiots that go up on buildings and they set up a GoPro, a pogo stick on the edge of the building, or do handstands? You do that, Luke? Right. These are they're out there, and if you watch them enough, you'll see the ones that end badly. And I have seen them, and they're awful. People lose their lives. These are typically young people, late teens, early 20s, because they still think that they're invincible and that they'll live forever. And they don't really care about consequences, or they think they're better than that. Okay? Well, that's what I noticed on this. There were people up there doing that. And but then I remember my own reaction was interesting, because the first time I walked out there, I kind of went like this. Ugh. And I did this. Just like that. All right? Now, I hadn't read a book about this. I hadn't heard a lecture. Nobody told me to do this. It was just, close enough. Close enough. Now, what's the difference between this piece of concrete and this piece of concrete? It's the same piece of concrete. It's been here for decades. I don't think it's going to collapse. So what's the difference? Well, the difference is the closer you get, the narrower the margin for error, right? And it's all of a sudden you're standing here. All it takes is for someone to nudge me or surprise me or for me to lose my balance or a gust of wind. Anything could happen. So you do this. Close enough. And there's not a rule there. It's not like, well, is this okay? Well, if this is okay, is this okay? Oh, well, if you say this is okay, then what's wrong with this? Well, what about this? And what about this? What about this? Right? Yeah, you're laughing. I would never do that with my own safety physically, but I do this all the time with my spiritual safety. I tell myself all kinds of stuff. Well, is this sin? No, well, about this? Oh, you say this is okay. Oh, I see. Well, what about this one? Right? We're kidding ourselves. And all the time, our guardian angel is going, here we go. We do the same thing with the door, if you want a different metaphor. There's that door again with the sin crouching out there. What are we doing with that door, right? Why are we hanging around it? It should be locked and barred with a bookcase in front of it. Instead, we're polishing the doorknob. We're making sure the hinges aren't rusty. And, I just want to make sure it's okay. You know, peephole, you still out there? Nope, still out there. Well, let me just open it a little bit and shut it there. See? I can do that. Open it a little more, shut it again. I haven't sinned yet. It's okay. I can do this and then back. 2-minute rule. It's okay. Right? We play games with ourselves. And all the time, God's going, you want to master sin? Go ahead. That's a bully, and you're... Right? Why do we do this to ourselves? Don't you like yourself? And then at the end, you're laying in a heap, in a bloody mess, writing your own Psalm 51. Oh, God, I'm the worst thing ever. I'm probably not even saved. How do you stand me? I'm the worst ever. He's like, it's not that you're evil. You're just kind of dumb. Hey, listen, guys. Don't call evil what God calls holy. You're holy because of Jesus, not because of your track record, but because of Jesus. That's not the issue. The issue is that you have an enemy that is bent on your destruction. And what I mean by that is he's not looking to drag you to hell. I think that ship has sailed if you're in Christ. He doesn't care that you're going to heaven. Satan doesn't. You know what he cares about? Making you irrelevant. Causing you to live a life that is just filled with defeat and regret and remorse. Because he knows something that we always often forget, and as God gave us authority over him. We're supposed to be stomping him. And if he can keep us all busy cleaning up our own failures and living lives of guilt and prayerlessness because we don't think we can pray now because I got to spend 2 weeks feeling lousy about all of that, then mission accomplished. But he's got plans for you, God does. And he wants you to live a life of victory and you're supposed to be stomping Satan's head. So, pursuant to that end, let us watch out for the inception. Let's watch the attitudes and the little things because they grow into big things. We don't really do well with temptation. We're not supposed to live in it. We're supposed to flee it. And it's not a bad thing to run.